This video is made possible by Vincero Watches Luxury. Handcrafted watches at fair prices. You can check them out through the link below and get a 15% discount and free shipping. Now, finding a watch that is stylish, bold, and also built to last, well, that can be a bit of an expensive endeavor. But today's sponsor, Vincero, they're absolutely changing that, allowing you to look good, whatever your budget. Now, you've probably heard me talk about Vincero before. They've sponsored this channel a few times, and you'll know that, well, they're not producing minimalist watches, they're producing great-looking bold pieces. Indeed, they've actually introduced a couple of new watches to their range, which are fully automatic. There's the Icon and the Apex, which are really worth checking out through that link below. I'm actually wearing a different watch. I'm wearing their Rogue right now, which has this rubber strap, which is perfect for, hotter summer weather. So unlike a leather strap, gets a little bit less sweaty, which is nice. Vincero have over 22,000 5-star reviews, so it's hard to go wrong. The attention to detail is great, the price for what you get is great, the feeling is great. Plus, all watches come with 30-day returns and a 2-year guarantee. Oh, also, while you're checking out their watches, why not have a look at their new range of sunglasses? Great way to complete an outfit. So check them out below, 15% discount and free shipping, or just go to vincerowatches.com/brainfood. When one thinks of Roman emperors, often two kinds come to mind: the heroic generals and the brilliant philosophers like Caesar Augustus and Marcus Aurelius, or the insane and depraved despots like Nero and Commodus. The latter two are well known for their long list of antics. For a video on Nero's famous fiddle incident and the truth about that, check out the link in the description below. We've done a video about that. But both Nero and Commodus were both preceded by an emperor who, in his 3 years and 10 months as ruler in Rome, acted in a manner that at first was bizarre and then descended into outright insanity. Born Gaius Julius Augustus Germanicus, the man better known as Caligula was the great-grandson of the Caesar Augustus, son of General Germanicus Julius Caesar, and the third man to assume the title of Roman emperor. During his early childhood, he would travel with his father, Germanicus, on his military campaigns, dressed in a little soldier's outfit. The soldiers took great humor in this and nicknamed him Caligula, meaning little boot. When he was around 7 years old, his father was killed in Syria, possibly poisoned by an agent of his great-uncle, the Emperor Tiberius, who saw his nephew as a potential political rival. After this, the young Caligula spent time in the care of his mother until she and his brother Nero were exiled to the island of Pandateria for treason. From then on, he lived with his great-grandmother Livia, the wife of Emperor Augustus, and then his grandmother Antonia Minor. While in exile, his brother and mother were abused and malnourished, leading to their deaths in 31 and 33 AD. Unsurprisingly, from this, their deaths caused Caligula to harbor a rather large amount of resentment towards Tiberius. No surprises there. Caligula was relocated to the island of Capria, a popular resort island off the west coast of Italy. Here, he was under the watchful eye of his great-uncle, but with some maneuvering and acting skill, he managed to avoid banishment or execution. For example, he ingratiated himself with Naevius Sartorius Macro, the head of Tiberius's guard, who would often speak well of Caligula on his behalf. Ultimately, he was given an honorary quaestorship, an important political office, and briefly married in 33 AD, but his wife, Junia Claudia, died in childbirth shortly after. 2 years later, in 35 AD, Caligula and his cousin Tiberius Gemellus were named co-heirs to emperor. A mere 2 years after that, Emperor Tiberius died in March of 37 AD, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it was rumored that Caligula, or possibly the aforementioned Macro, may have hastened his death. As for Macro, Roman historian Tacitus claims he smothered the 77-year-old emperor with a pillow, while Suetonius alleges Caligula did the deed himself. Whatever the truth of that, after the emperor's death, Caligula and Macro successfully removed Gemellus from Tiberius's will, and he then held sole claim to the principate. He was inaugurated by the Senate later that month and was heralded by the Roman people with immense celebration. The first 7 months of his rule were rather joyful by all accounts. Ingratiating himself to the masses, he relieved citizens overburdened by imperial taxation, recalled political exiles, and funded many public spectacles. For his own part, he also retrieved the remains of his mother and brothers and ensured that they received a proper place of honor. But in October of his first year as emperor, something changed. Caligula fell ill. Some historians suggest that he may have been poisoned, while others assert it was nothing more than a simple preventable common illness. But either way, something changed directly thereafter, at least if his behavior is any indication. Not long after, he began executing members of his family, including his cousin Gemellus, as well as his father-in-law and brother-in-law. His two younger sisters were exiled, and only his uncle Claudius, the future fourth emperor and Caligula's replacement, was spared, simply to be kept around as an object for ridicule and amusement. Further, Caligula began to slander the memory of Emperor Augustus and stated that his own mother had actually been the result of an incestuous relationship from Augustus with his daughter. Over the next 3 years, Caligula's reign would become more and more erratic. At first, he pushed for tax reforms to relieve an overburdened populace and promoted several plebeians to the more esteemed equestrian rank. This ingratiated him with the common people, but it drew the ire of the Roman elite. Beyond this, he conducted numerous building projects, including the expansion of ports on the toe of Italia and Syracuse to allow for more grain imports. He completed the temple of his great-grandfather, the now deified Caesar Augustus, as well as the theater of Pompeii. He began construction of 2 major aqueducts to better distribute water to the city, and went so far as hauling an obelisk all the way from Egypt to use as a centerpiece in the circus he had built. The obelisk is actually still around today and is prominently displayed near the Vatican in Rome. Early in his reign, he also completed perhaps the most insane of his building projects, a giant pontoon bridge across the Bay of Baiae in southern Italy. He did this just to ride his favorite horse into Tartus across the bay and fulfill a mock prophecy, saying he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. Speaking of the horse, he also apparently attempted to make this horse consul and built the horse a stable out of marble, a manager from ivory, and filled the horse's not-so-humble abode with the finest purple trappings. Caligula also designated a house fully furnished and filled with attendant slaves for dinner parties held by this horse on occasion. Unfortunately for the humor of it all, he was unsuccessful in making Incitatus a consul. However, he did manage to make him a priest. Moving on from there, according to Roman historians, Caligula began to refer to himself as Pater Exercitum, the father of the armies, and Optimus Maximus Caesar, the best and greatest Caesar. He supposedly also had an incestuous relationship with his sister Drusilla and kept her with him even after she married. Upon her death, he ordered a period of public mourning over her. He later incorporated the temple devoted to the twin deities Castor and Pollux into his own palace. Continuing his trend of rather odd and seemingly dangerous behavior, attempting to stir up unrest between the commoners and the social elite, he would sell seats to plebeians so that when equestrians showed up to plays, all their seats would already be taken. Naturally, this didn't sit well with them. Further, during public spectacles, the emperor would withdraw the shade curtains from the top of the amphitheater when the sun was hottest and forbid anyone from leaving, then only provided wounded or sickly beasts and aged gladiators to fight for their entertainment. He would on occasion also close the granaries so that the people could starve for a bit. Apparently, having a bucket list life goal to piss off as many people as humanly possible, Caligula also began to execute accused criminals without hearing their cases, going so far as to compel parents to be present at their children's executions. One man, saying he was unwell and unable to attend one such execution, was met with Caligula's personal litter, who was sent to fetch him. And once, when he heard an equestrian crying out that he was innocent in the arena, Caligula had the man brought to him, cut out his tongue, and tossed him back in. He also fed prisoners to the wild beasts he reserved for his games, whether they were actually guilty of whatever crime or not, just didn't seem to be a concern. Keeping up the crazy, Caligula also in one instance apparently asked a man whom he'd brought back from exile how he spent his time away from home. Fearing for his own life, the man replied carefully, "I prayed to the gods that Tiberius would die and you should become emperor." Hearing this, Caligula promptly dispatched word that anyone he had banished must now be executed. But Caligula's mistreatment of others did not end with the poor or his political rivals. He often forced his officials to run alongside his litter wearing full togas, a heavy wool garment which is perhaps not best suited for sport. Then they would have to attend to him at dinner distributing napkins. In one specific instance, it's also noted that while training, the veteran gladiator with whom Caligula practiced his martial skills purposefully threw himself at the emperor's feet in defeat. Rather than simply end the training session as you might expect, Caligula stabbed him to death and ran about with the palm fronds, the traditional signal of victory shown by gladiators, as if he'd just been in a real gladiatorial fight. Reversing his early efforts to ingratiate the masses, he ultimately began taxing the Roman people heavily, even arresting wealthy citizens and confiscating their property, and he once demanded gifts to be given to him on New Year's Day from every single person in Rome. Then, once he'd received his gifts, apparently he, just for the fun of it, rolled around in massive piles of gold coins that he'd accumulated from the haul. Beyond day-to-day management of the empire, Roman emperors were often marked by their military campaigns, but Caligula was a tad different here too. He only went on a single military campaign during his tenure as emperor. Wishing to conquer Britain, he assembled a vast army and made way. At times, he would have the army move at such haste that he and his elite personal guard had to stow their standard to keep up, and at others so slowly that he could order the towns ahead to sweep the roads and wet them down to settle the dust. Encountering no resistance along the way, he ordered some Germanic members of his guard to cross the Rhine and lie in wait. During his evening meal, he ordered a messenger to inform him that the enemy was advancing, then quickly captured the men and announced his great victory. When he reached the northwestern coast of Gaul, modern France, he declared war against Neptune himself. His soldiers were directed to stab the sea and collect seashells as war trophies. Then, gathering the best and tallest Gaulish men he could find, he ordered them to dye their hair blonde and assume German names so they could pretend to be prisoners of war upon his return to Rome. Continuing the crazy, as his reign continued, he began to dress up as several gods, often bearing the tokens usually associated with them, such as a lightning bolt, trident, or caduceus. He is also described as affixing a golden beard to his face, wearing women's shoes, or dressing in the habit of Venus. He also began referring to himself as Jupiter on public documents. At one point, he even ordered all the statues of deities be brought from Greece so that he could replace their heads with his own. This included the sixth wonder of the ancient world, the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Not limiting himself to the Greek or Roman gods, frustrated and mistrustful of the Hebrews for their stubborn displays of monotheism, Caligula attempted to have his statue erected in the Temple of Jerusalem. As you might expect, fearing a revolt, the governor of Syria delayed completing the order by almost a year. After advisors finally convinced him to reverse the order, Caligula quickly changed his mind, renamed the temple of illustrious Gaius the new Jupiter, and built a colossal bronze gilt statue of himself to place within. As you might imagine from all of this, pissing off basically every person in his empire, and more than a few beyond, couldn't last forever. Finally, the senators grew tired of his antics. 3 men, led by an individual named Cassius Chaerea, began plotting to assassinate him. As for Chaerea's specific beef with the emperor, Caligula seems to have enjoyed making powerful people kiss his ring while he extended his middle finger at them. Yes, people have been flipping off others for thousands of years, with the original implication seeming to represent the penis, as we've covered before on the origin of giving people the bird. In any event, on a no doubt completely unrelated note to this, as mentioned, the chief organizer of Caligula's assassination and first to stab him was Cassius Chaerea, who Caligula liked to do this very thing to, as noted by Suetonius. Gaius used to taunt him, a man already well on in years, with voluptuousness and effeminacy by every form of insult. When he asked for the watchword, Gaius would give him Priapus, or Venus, and when Chaerea had occasion to thank him for anything, he would hold out his hand to kiss, forming and moving it in an obscene fashion. In any event, the conspirators' plans were forced into motion when Caligula stated that he planned to move to the Egyptian city of Alexandria to be worshipped there as a living god. And so it was that they, along with many other conspirators, cornered the emperor in an underground tunnel beneath the palace and gave him the old Caesarean treatment. It is reported that he made no sound of alarm when the assassins struck and only attempted to flee out of the tunnels as he was stabbed to death. After, members of the guard went on a bloody rampage, killing several of the conspirators, as well as nearby senators who were uninvolved in the assassination. The emperor's body was half-burned on a hastily assembled pyre and buried on the spot. His wife and daughter were murdered along with him. Rumor has it the garden in which the emperor was burned and buried became haunted by spiritual apparitions until Caligula's sisters, having returned from exile, finished the cremation and gave him a proper burial. With his death, the Roman Empire saw the end of the Julian Caesars. As to why he acted so bizarrely during his rule, this is a matter of debate. It is noted that during his life, Caligula often complained that the times he lived in were relatively peaceful, unmarked by famine, war, or natural disasters, and thus he feared he may pass from memory if he was not associated with any noteworthy event. This may have led him to become so obsessed with putting on military shows, promoting himself as the very incarnation of several deities, and the constant self-promotion through trying to assert his image onto every statue in the empire, obsessed with being being remembered as his forebears were. Whether or not that was his motivation or not, in the end, the man himself is indeed one of the most remembered of Roman emperors, though, of course, remembered not for any great achievements or with any reverence, but simply for his insane behavior and for establishing a precedent for instability that would follow, though never quite be equaled, by emperors to come. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do smash that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Also, please do check out our fantastic sponsor, Vincero Watches. There is a link below. And thank you for watching.